The morning sunlight filtered through the lace curtains as Margaret, 72, sat down at her small oak table, sipping tea and humming softly. Retirement had been lonely since her husband passed, but she found comfort in her little rituals, reading, gardening, and occasionally spoiling her grandson, Ethan, whom she adored more than anyone. She opened her banking app on her tablet to check her savings. It had been her nest egg, the money she and her late husband had built over decades of hard work. But as the screen loaded, her hand trembled. The number didn't make sense. Her retirement account balance read $243.17. Her throat went dry. She blinked hard, thinking it must be a mistake. Just last month, it had been $38,000, everything she'd saved for her final years. She scrolled through the transactions, and that's when her heart dropped. Over a dozen transfers. Each one to an account under a familiar name, Ethan Miles. For a long moment, she couldn't breathe. Her own grandson, the boy she raised, fed, and helped through college, had taken it all. No calls. No explanations. Nothing. Her mind spun back to a few weeks ago, when he'd asked, "Grandma, could I borrow a bit? Just to help with rent." She'd smiled and said yes, trusting him completely. But this wasn't a loan. This was theft. Margaret's hands shook as she picked up the phone and dialed him. He answered on the third ring, sounding half asleep. "Ethan? Did you take money from my account?" A pause. Then a sigh. "Yeah, Grandma, I did." "Relax, okay? You don't need it that much. I'll pay you back someday." Her voice broke. "That was my retirement, Ethan. Your grandfather and I." "Oh, come on," he interrupted, his tone dismissive. "You're always at home, you don't travel, you don't even spend. I just needed it more right now. It's not a big deal." The silence that followed was suffocating. Margaret's tears streamed down her cheeks, but she didn't let him hear her cry. You had no right," she whispered. He laughed lightly. "You're overreacting. It's not like you'll miss it." And then he hung up. Margaret sat there, frozen, staring at her trembling reflection in the tablet screen. Her world, the trust she'd built, the love she'd given, felt shattered. She'd always believed family came first. But now, family had stolen from her. The clock ticked on the wall. The tea had gone cold. She could have called the police. She could have told his parents. But no, that wasn't her way. Margaret had always believed that life has a way of teaching lessons. And sometimes, you just had to help karma do its work. As she stared out the window, the pain slowly began to shift into something else. Not rage. Not grief. But resolve. She whispered under her breath, "If he thinks I don't need it that much, maybe it's time I remind him what happens when you take from someone who gave you everything." And that was the moment Margaret, the quiet, gentle grandmother everyone underestimated, decided to strike back. Not with anger. Not with violence. But with a plan so calm, so perfectly crafted, that Ethan would never see it coming. Margaret didn't sleep that night. She sat in her armchair, the house quiet except for the faint ticking of the clock. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw Ethan's dismissive face, that smirk, that arrogance. "You don't need it that much," he'd said, as if her entire life's savings were pocket change. By sunrise, her tears had dried, and something new had taken root in her heart: determination. Margaret wasn't naive. She knew she couldn't simply take Ethan to court. He'd twist it, make her look confused or senile. Besides, she didn't want to destroy him, she wanted to teach him. The kind of lesson he would never forget. She spent her morning going through her old papers and files, the faint scent of dust and ink filling the air. Her husband, Harold, had always handled finances smartly. Over the years, he had left her notes on every investment, insurance policy, and even an old credit card account she rarely touched. As she sorted through the drawer, something caught her eye: a card in Ethan's name, one she had co-signed for when he was 18. He'd long forgotten about it. The card was still active. Margaret smiled faintly. "You used my account," she murmured. "Now I'll use yours." But she didn't plan to buy silly things or waste money. No, Margaret's mind worked differently. She wanted to make him feel what she had felt: the helplessness, the shock, the loss. So she began planning. Over the next few days, Margaret visited a few stores, dressed neatly in her floral scarf and pearls. She looked like any other sweet grandmother. No one questioned her when she purchased fine furniture, small electronics, and home essentials using Ethan's card. She didn't go wild, she was smart. Every purchase had a purpose. Meanwhile, she began quietly shifting what little remained of her own funds into a new private account, one Ethan couldn't access. Then came step 2. She called Ethan one afternoon, her tone calm and almost kind. "Ethan, dear," she said sweetly. "I've been thinking about what you said. Maybe I don't need all that money after all. I just wanted to make sure you're doing okay." On the other end, Ethan sounded surprised but pleased. "Yeah, Grandma, I'm good. Just trying to get my business started. Don't worry about it, okay?" She smiled to herself. "I'm glad, sweetheart. You always were ambitious. Why don't you come over next Sunday? I'll make your favorite, roast chicken." He hesitated. "Sure, yeah. Sounds good." When she hung up, Margaret leaned back in her chair. Her plan wasn't just about money, it was about humbling him. She wanted him to see that his sweet old grandma still had more wisdom, wit, and power than he could ever imagine. The following week, the deliveries started arriving at Ethan's apartment, things he hadn't ordered but had to pay for because they were charged to his card. High-end groceries, fitness equipment, a subscription to a luxury streaming service. Ethan called her, furious. "Grandma, what the hell? Why are there all these charges on my account?" "Oh, my dear," she said gently, feigning confusion. I thought you said you didn't mind me using it. You told me I didn't need money that much, right? Yeah, but... Oh, don't worry, she interrupted softly. It's not like you'll miss it. The silence on the other end was heavy. For the first time, Ethan understood the sting of his own words. Margaret hung up and smiled. But her plan wasn't over, it had only just begun. She wasn't done teaching her grandson what it truly meant to value someone's sacrifices. Because soon, she'd make sure the entire family knew who Ethan really was. The Sunday dinner was supposed to be peaceful: roast chicken, soft music, and a smiling family gathered around the table. But for Margaret, it was the stage where her quiet revenge would take center spotlight. She had spent the day preparing everything perfectly. The table was dressed in white linen, candles flickered softly, and her old china set, the one she had saved for special occasions, gleamed under the warm light. Her hands trembled slightly as she arranged the dishes, not from weakness, but from a strange, electric anticipation. She had invited everyone: her daughter, son-in-law, and, of course, Ethan. The grandson who had betrayed her trust so easily. When Ethan arrived, he was wearing that same smug grin she had grown to despise. He hugged her loosely, glancing at his phone mid-embrace. "Nice setup, Grandma," he said, sliding into a chair. "Guess retirement gives you plenty of free time." Margaret smiled softly. "Oh yes, dear. More than enough to notice when people think they're smarter than me." He frowned but said nothing. The family chatted casually at first. Her daughter talked about work, her son-in-law about his new car. Margaret let them talk, her face serene, her mind sharp. And when the plates were cleared and the wine glasses half empty, she spoke. "So," she began, her voice calm but commanding. "Ethan, I heard your business is doing quite well." He leaned back, smirking. "Trying. It's a grind, but I'm making it work." "Oh, I'm sure," she said. "Though I imagine those deliveries must be a little confusing, The table went quiet. Ethan's head snapped up. "What deliveries?" She smiled, that sweet, grandmotherly smile that hid daggers. "Oh, you know. The ones that showed up at your door last week. The gym equipment, the gourmet groceries, the premium channel subscriptions, all those lovely things you suddenly owned." Her daughter blinked. "Ethan? What is she talking about?" Ethan's face flushed. "It's nothing. Some kind of mix-up with my card." Margaret interrupted softly. "Oh no, darling. No mix-up. You see, I used your card. I thought it was fair, since you used my retirement fund." Her words dropped like stones into the silence. Her daughter's fork froze halfway to her mouth. Her son-in-law looked between them, stunned. "Ethan," he said slowly, "you took her money?" Ethan's voice rose. "I didn't take it. She said she didn't need it. I said I'd help you, not give you permission to steal, Margaret said firmly, her tone steady but full of quiet fire. You didn't ask. You didn't care. You just assumed I'd roll over because I'm old and harmless. But you forgot one thing. Everyone leaned in. She looked him dead in the eyes. I'm still your grandmother. And I raised this family. I built what you take for granted. You think age makes me weak, Ethan? No. It makes me dangerous, because I've learned how to survive people like you. The air in the room turned heavy. Ethan stammered, Grandma, I didn't mean. Oh, I think you did, she said, her voice softening. But that's all right. You'll learn now. She stood, slow and regal, then placed a small envelope on the table. Inside is the report from my bank. Every transaction you made. Every dollar you moved. I've spoken to a lawyer. Don't worry, I'm not pressing charges. Yet. Ethan's eyes widened. Yet. She smiled faintly. That depends on whether you fix what you broke. You have 1 week to return every cent. If not, the police get this envelope. And trust me, dear, they won't be as forgiving as I am. Her daughter's eyes filled with tears. Mom, I had no idea. I know you didn't, Margaret said, sitting down again, her strength unshaken. But now you all do. The family dinner ended in uneasy silence. Ethan left early, pale and shaking. Margaret watched from the window as his car disappeared into the night. Her lips curved into a soft, bittersweet smile. Justice didn't always roar. Sometimes it whispered, and tonight, her whisper was louder than any scream. 3 days passed after the dinner, and the silence that followed was louder than any argument. Margaret's phone sat still on her kitchen counter, no messages, no calls. But she didn't need to check to know that Ethan was stewing in guilt and fear. It wasn't just about the money anymore. It was about respect. Something he had thrown away without a second thought. Margaret spent those days in quiet reflection. She walked through her little garden, trimmed her roses, and read her favorite book by the window, pretending that everything was normal. But inside, she was waiting. Not for an apology, but for understanding. On the 4th morning, a soft knock echoed through her small house. She opened the door, and there he was, Ethan, looking nothing like the confident young man she'd once known. His eyes were red from sleepless nights, his hair unkempt, his voice low. "Grandma," he said. "Can I come in?" Margaret studied him for a moment. Then she nodded. "Of course, dear. I was just making tea." He followed her to the kitchen, glancing around nervously, like he was standing in a courtroom. I came to say I'm sorry," he began. "I didn't realize how much I hurt you. I was desperate. I thought I could pay it back before you noticed." Margaret poured 2 cups of tea, her movements slow and deliberate. "And when you told me I didn't need it? Was that desperation, too?" He swallowed hard. That was me being stupid. She placed his cup in front of him. You're right about that. They sat in silence for a few minutes, the ticking clock filling the air. Finally, she said, "You know, Ethan, when you were little, you used to help me clip coupons. You'd sit on the floor and tell me you were my little banker. I'd laugh and tell you that one day you'd take care of me. Do you remember that?" He nodded, shame in his eyes. "Yeah, I do." She smiled faintly. "And look where we are now." Ethan looked down at his hands. "I don't know what to say." "There's nothing you can say," she replied softly. "Words don't rebuild trust. Actions do." He reached into his jacket and pulled out an envelope. "Here," he said. "It's most of the money. I sold some things, my watch, my laptop. I'll get you the rest soon." Margaret took the envelope but didn't open it. "This isn't about the money anymore, Ethan. It's about what you thought of me, that I was too old to need my savings, too weak to fight back." He blinked, eyes glistening. "I was wrong. I know that now." She sipped her tea. "Maybe. But you need to live like you know that." There was a long pause. Then Ethan said something that almost broke her heart. "I didn't just lose your money, Grandma. I lost you. You've always been my safe place, and I ruined that." For the first time, she saw sincerity, raw, painful sincerity, in his face. But she also knew that regret didn't erase betrayal. Margaret reached across the table, her old hands resting gently on his. "Ethan, I'll always love you. But love doesn't mean I'll protect you from your own mistakes." He nodded silently, tears welling up. "I understand." When he left that afternoon, she watched him go, a mix of sadness and relief swirling inside her. She had her apology, but it had come too late to fix what was broken. That night, as she sat by her window under the soft glow of her lamp, she opened the envelope. The money was there, most of it, anyway. But it didn't make her feel better. Because forgiveness, she realized, isn't something you give to make others feel good. It's something you earn by changing, and Ethan still had a long road ahead before he'd earn hers. Margaret closed her eyes, whispering to herself, "He'll learn." Life has a way of teaching those who don't listen. And life, as she was about to discover, was already preparing the next lesson. A month passed since that uneasy apology. The autumn air had grown colder, and so had the distance between Margaret and Ethan. He had promised to make things right, to repay every cent, to do better. But Margaret had lived long enough to know that promises are cheap when they're made by guilt. Her days went on quietly. She tended to her garden, baked for her book club, and pretended her heart didn't ache when she thought of how her grandson had changed. She wanted to believe in him, she truly did. But somewhere deep down, she knew something was coming. And she was right. One chilly Friday morning, as Margaret was preparing her tea, the phone rang. "Mrs. Lawson," a polite male voice said. This is Detective Harris from the local police department. We're calling about your grandson, Ethan. Her stomach dropped. What about him? He's in custody, ma'am. There's been a report of credit card fraud involving multiple accounts. We're still investigating, but since your name was connected to one of the cards, we thought we should inform you. For a long moment, Margaret said nothing. Her hands trembled slightly as she set her teacup down. I see, she finally replied. Thank you, officer. I appreciate the call. After hanging up, she sat back in her chair, the words echoing in her mind, credit card fraud. It wasn't surprise she felt. It was something colder. Something like inevitability. Ethan had always been impulsive, chasing shortcuts instead of building foundations. The stolen retirement money had been just the beginning, not the end. Later that afternoon, Ethan himself showed up at her door, his face pale, his voice shaking. Grandma, I need your help. Margaret stood silently in the doorway, her heart torn between pity and pain. He continued, they froze my accounts. My business partners turned on me. I didn't do all of it, I swear. She stopped him with a look. A look that carried every ounce of disappointment, love, and quiet wisdom she'd earned in her lifetime. Ethan, she said softly, how many times have you said that word, just? You just needed money. You just made a mistake. You just wanted a chance. But do you ever stop and see the pattern? He clenched his fists. I didn't mean for this to happen. Please, Grandma. I need you to talk to the police. Tell them you know me. She sighed. I do know you. And that's the problem. He blinked. What does that mean? It means, she said, her tone steady but sorrowful, I know you've never learned to face the consequences of your choices. I tried to teach you gently. Life is teaching you now, harshly. Ethan's voice broke. Are you saying you won't help me? Margaret's eyes glistened. I'm saying that sometimes, love looks like letting someone fall. Because catching them over and over only teaches them they can keep jumping. He dropped his gaze, defeated. I never thought you'd give up on me. She stepped closer, resting a trembling hand on his cheek. I haven't given up on you, Ethan. But I won't save you from yourself anymore. For a moment, the world was silent, just a grandmother and her broken grandson standing in the doorway of what once was a home filled with trust. As he turned to leave, she called softly, Ethan. He paused. When you finally understand what you've done, and who you've become, come back. Not for money. For forgiveness. He nodded weakly and walked away, shoulders heavy with shame. Margaret closed the door and leaned against it, tears slipping down her face. She had lost so much, money, trust, peace, but she hadn't lost her strength. Outside, the wind howled through the fading leaves. And in that haunting sound, she heard something almost like a whisper. He'll learn, Margaret. He'll learn. Because sometimes karma doesn't come with thunder. It comes quietly, through the lessons life forces us to live. Winter had settled over the small town. The trees stood bare, their branches reaching like fingers toward the gray sky. Margaret spent most of her days by the window, wrapped in a knitted shawl, sipping her tea as snowflakes drifted lazily outside. It had been 4 months since she last saw Ethan. The silence between them was heavy, but peaceful. For the first time in years, her life felt calm, no chaos, no guilt. Just quiet. Then, one evening, the phone rang. Her hand hesitated before she picked it up. "Hello?" A tired, familiar voice answered. "Grandma, it's me." Margaret's heart skipped. She hadn't heard his voice since the day he left in shame. But something in his tone was different, softer, humbler, broken. "Ethan," she said gently. "It's been a while." "I know," he replied. "I didn't think you'd answer." "I almost didn't," she admitted. "Why are you calling?" He took a shaky breath. "I wanted to tell you. I learned my lesson." Margaret leaned back in her chair, listening silently. "I lost everything, Grandma," he said. "The business collapsed. My friends disappeared. I spent nights sleeping in my car before finding a small job at a warehouse. It's hard work, but it's honest. For the first time, I'm earning instead of taking. I finally understand what you meant about building, not borrowing." Margaret closed her eyes, letting his words sink in. For the first time, he wasn't making excuses. There was no arrogance, no entitlement, just truth. "I'm proud of you, Ethan," she said softly. "It takes courage to rebuild." He laughed quietly, a sound filled with exhaustion. "I don't deserve that yet. But I'm trying." There was a pause, and then his voice cracked. "Grandma, I miss you. Not the money, not the help, you. I miss sitting at your table, listening to your stories. I miss how you always believed in me." Her throat tightened. "Belief is a powerful thing, Ethan. It can lift people up, or blind them. I think I was blinded for a while." "I know," he said. "I don't expect you to forgive me. I just wanted to say thank you for teaching me the hard way." Tears welled in her eyes. "You finally listened, didn't you?" He chuckled faintly. "Guess I needed life to shout it at me first." For a long moment, neither spoke. The only sound was the soft hum of the old clock and a faint whistle of wind through the window. Then Margaret said, "Would you like to come for dinner this Sunday?" There was silence on the line. Then, a quiet, trembling "Really?" "Yes," she said, her voice steady but warm. "You've fallen. Now it's time to stand again. And no one should stand alone." Ethan exhaled shakily. "Thank you, Grandma. I promise this time. I'll earn my seat at your table." She smiled through her tears. That's all I ever wanted." When she hung up, Margaret stayed by the phone for a while, her heart heavy yet full. Forgiveness didn't come from forgetting, it came from understanding. And in that moment, she knew Ethan finally understood. That Sunday, when he arrived, thinner, humbler, but with eyes that finally held sincerity, Margaret greeted him with open arms. There were no long speeches, no lectures, just a quiet meal shared between two souls who had finally met in the middle of regret and love. As they ate, she thought of the journey they'd both endured, the pain, the betrayal, the lessons carved deep into the heart. And when dinner ended, she said softly, "You know, Ethan, people think money is the hardest thing to earn back. But they're wrong. It's trust. And you've started to earn mine again." He nodded, eyes glassy. "I'll spend the rest of my life proving I deserve it." Margaret smiled, feeling something she hadn't felt in years, peace. Sometimes, revenge isn't about taking back what's stolen. It's about showing those who wronged you what true strength looks like, forgiveness with boundaries. As the snow fell softly outside, Margaret looked toward the future, quiet, bittersweet, and beautifully fair. Spring arrived, gentle, green, and forgiving. The same way Margaret had learned to be. Her garden bloomed again, filling the air with lilac and rose. The world was alive, and for the first time in years, so was her heart. Ethan visited often now. He didn't bring gifts or apologies, just himself. He helped mow the lawn, fix the fence, and sometimes sat quietly on the porch while Margaret told stories of her youth. There was a peace between them, not perfect, but earned. One Sunday morning, as they shared tea beneath a maple tree, Ethan reached into his pocket and handed her a small velvet box. "What's this?" Margaret asked, surprised. "Open it," he said softly. Inside was a silver locket, old-fashioned, beautifully simple. On one side, a small photo of Ethan as a boy, grinning with his missing front teeth. On the other, an inscription. "For the woman who taught me the true value of everything." Margaret's eyes shimmered. "Ethan, this is beautiful." He smiled, nervous but sincere. "It's not expensive. I just wanted you to have something real, something earned." She closed the locket in her trembling hands. "This means more than you know." He nodded. "I do. That's why I didn't buy it with my card. I made it myself." Margaret looked up, astonished. "You made it?" "Yeah," Ethan said, his voice cracking with pride. "I've been learning metalwork at the shop. I wanted to create something lasting. Like you said, value doesn't come from money. It comes from effort." Tears slipped down Margaret's cheeks. "You've grown up, haven't you?" He smiled gently. "Finally." They sat there in silence for a while, the sunlight warming their faces, the sound of distant wind chimes filling the air. It wasn't the grand ending Margaret once imagined, no riches returned, no dramatic apologies shouted through tears. It was simpler, and therefore perfect. Weeks later, when Margaret passed peacefully in her sleep, she left behind a note, folded neatly on her nightstand. Ethan found it the next morning when he came to check on her. His hands shook as he unfolded it. The handwriting was careful, graceful, familiar. Dear Ethan, life has a way of humbling us before it heals us. I used to think I needed to protect you from failure. Now I know failure was what shaped you into the man I always hoped you'd be. The money I lost was never the true loss. What hurt was watching you lose yourself. But you found your way back, and that's worth more than any dollar ever printed. I'm proud of you. Truly. With all my love. Grandma. Tears fell freely down his face, but they weren't the same kind as before. They weren't bitter, they were grateful. He placed the note beside the locket and whispered, "I'll make you proud every day." And he did. Ethan took over the small workshop where he'd learned metalwork and renamed it Margaret's Forge. Every piece he made carried a small engraving, "Value is what you create, not what you take." Customers loved the craftsmanship, but what made it special was the story behind it, a story of loss, lessons, and love that outlasted everything else. Years later, when asked why he chose that name, Ethan would always smile and say, "Because she taught me that even broken things can shine again, if you polish them with patience." And so, in the quiet rhythm of his hammer and the glow of molten metal, Ethan kept her legacy alive, not through wealth, but through wisdom. It was the final gift, not from her will, but from her heart.